The most surprising thing for me probably is like the way that I orgasm. I have a full body convulsion. I feel oftentimes that I have less anxiety when I'm in a room full of people and I'm naked than I do when I'm fully clothed and in public. I think watching your own porn is very important because you won't know if you don't see yourself.
Hi, my name is Bree Mills, and I am a porn director with a purpose. Now, throughout my career, I have covered just about every niche, and I've created some award-winning films and brands along the way. But now, I'm much more interested in getting to know the real people behind my characters. And that's because I believe adult entertainers can be some of the most powerful role models when it comes to sex ed, consent, empowerment, and wellness. By asking the right questions, our community can really help people better understand themselves. So that's the mission of this podcast. Let's get up close. Chanel Camryn.
Hi.
Hi. It's a pleasure to meet you in person.
Yes, I'm so happy to be here.
I've kind of decided that, I mean, obviously we've worked with you a good number of times this year, but it's our first time being on set together. And so I've sort of decided this podcast, like one of the side missions is if I've sort of, you know, seen what you've done, but we haven't met yet, that this is like the best icebreaker for us to meet. So thank you for coming down to the hot seat.
You know, it's not often that I get to meet people with conversation first rather than like, here I am.
There you go. Exactly. And that is what I am most interested in. So this is like a perfect fit. Keep all your clothes on, but we're going to talk a lot about sex. Tell me a fun fact about yourself.
Well, I'm pretty flexible. That has worked out wonders in this job. But I have to say, like, the most surprising thing for me probably is like the way that I orgasm.
Okay,
and
we're just getting right into it.
No, but I mean, like, it's just it's not common.
Okay, I'm curious. So, how do you orgasm, Chanel Camryn?
Yeah, so like I have a full body convulsion, and it's very intense, and I actually come a lot. And when I got into the industry, I didn't realize that wasn't normal for people. So it was pretty much just like, oh, I could go really far with this. I've got like a sweet little apple, like I'm hiding in my bag that no one knows about.
Like your signature move is the full body convulsion.
Yeah, no, and it like grew into like what my fans like call me now. So it's.
There you go. So what do your fans call you?
The Quiver Queen.
The Quiver Queen.
When it came, I was like, it's stuck. You know, I was like, that's the one.
Amazing. So Quiver Queen, tell me about a little bit about, you know, before you became known officially as the Quiver Queen. What was your upbringing like? Tell us a little bit about your background.
Yeah. So I moved not a lot, but I did a very drastic move when I was younger. So I grew up mainly in like Jacksonville, Florida, in a very like ghetto suburban area. And then when I was like 13, we moved to Alaska. Wow. So a very like polar opposite. And so I went to high school there in a little bit, graduated, spent some of my like adult years, my first job and stuff. So before I got into the industry, I was actually in nursing. And then my like kind of gateway into adult things was I did this like bikini barista job for a little while, which just kind of got me more comfortable with myself. Because in Alaska, you wear a lot of clothes. So, you know, when you get naked, you're kind of like, the lights are off. But no, that kind of like led me into starting into sex work. And then I like my OnlyFans into porn.
So what were some of like the biggest juxtapositions between life in Florida versus life in Alaska?
I think a lot of it just had to do with the way people are and the environment that I was in. Like it was a very, I don't want to say like kill or be killed, but it was like, you know, like it's more of like a fight for survival in that type of area. Like a lot of the people that I grew up with did not make it like past their teenage years, and just got sucked into pretty terrible things. So I do think that my mom like pulled me out of that environment at a very good time because I was going down a not so good path. And so like then going to Alaska where it was like, okay, now I don't have all these social pressures, dangers, and things like that I have to worry about. I can focus on like being a kid and like figuring out what I'm going to do when I decide to like jump into my adult life. So I do think that like Alaska saved me and in a sense of like it put me in a position where I could make my own decision. I do think that either way, I probably would have found myself in porn. I just think it would have been a different go around and maybe I wouldn't have been in the best place, like when I got in.
Yeah. Yeah. What was, so you mentioned that you were in high school in Alaska.
Mm-hmm.
What was the environment like, you know, through adolescence and leading up to that first job you ended up or the job you ended up having as the bikini barista?
So I went to a very, like, my town was a mile long, a very small school. I think my graduating class was actually like 30 kids. So I kind of just showed up for an hour and then left, you know, for graduation. But I really only went to high school for 2 years, and then I graduated early and I left home at 15. So I moved 3 hours away from where my family was staying. And like, that's when I got the opportunity to take a management job at, I think I was like 17 at this point, at a skilled nursing facility. And then I ended up actually like being assistant administrator for that. So I did that for like a half a year before I decided to start working on the floor with patients. And then I was probably in healthcare a total of like 2.5 years. I had my CNA certification. I had started going to nursing school. I wanted to be an NP, which is a nurse practitioner. But COVID ruined healthcare. It pretty much ruined it. And I like got in because I loved taking care of people, and it was no longer about caring for people. I mean, healthcare had kind of always been about like the money in the sense, you know, of the way that hospitals act. But when COVID came, it really just took it the rest of the way. There was no more, like we didn't care about the patients. So I quit. And then the fun thing I decided to do, you know, after like, you know, trying to go to school and do what everyone else thought was a good idea and was like a pristine career. Then I like got into the bikini barista, which was actually my boyfriend at the time's idea, which helped me to like open up, feel comfortable in my own body, like have fun. I made really good tips, drank a lot of coffee, got frostbite on my ass. But other than that, like that was a very good point in my life for like learning myself and becoming comfortable before transitioning.
Would you say that like your interest in nursing was to help others, and then you just sort of discovered through the barista job and then obviously getting into other forms of sex work that it was sort of equally interesting to focus on yourself?
I think the biggest thing for me was like growing up, especially being the new kid from Florida who like I got bullied a lot when I got to Alaska. Like they don't really like outsiders coming in. Because they're a very close-knit group of kids. But I think for me, it was mainly just like, I did it for myself. Like it was the first time in my life where I didn't, like, because when I got into nursing, it wasn't necessarily, I loved what I did, but I did it more or less for people to be proud of me. Yeah. To have something, because, you know, I didn't come from a family that was going to be, I was the first one to graduate high school, first one to go to college. So like I was trying to set an example for like my younger sibling. But when I got into like the industry and the sex work things, it was more of like, I don't really care if anyone like says that this isn't cool or this is wrong or it's raunchy. Like I'm doing this because it makes me happy. And like at the end of the day, I pay my own bills and I live with myself. So like your opinion doesn't matter. Yeah. So yeah, I think for me, it was like the transition was more of like doing something that other people wanted me to do to doing something that was just for me.
What are some of your kind of earliest memories about your own sexuality?
You know, I wasn't really a sexual person. I think that I always thought of sex a lot. I was very curious, but like I lost my virginity at a very like older age compared to most. I wasn't sexually active, you know, up until like late of my high school and like transitioning into like 18 and things like that. But I think like movies, my mom used to watch a lot of True Blood, and that was like some of my first experiences of like seeing naked bodies and like the softcore side of things that are in movies. And so I remember we'd watch the episodes together and I'd say like, oh no, I just want to watch the vampires. Like I just love the show. When in reality, every time they had me cover my eyes, I just wanted to like peek and like see what was going on. And
that's one of my favorite questions to ask is like those early pop culture media references, because I think it's so telling, right? So so what was it about seeing the sexuality on True Blood that spoke to you? Was it just the fact that it was the first time you saw kind of that type of sexuality?
I don't think it was necessarily just because it was the first time. I think honestly, because now looking back into like what I'm into in my adult life, it was like probably that it was more aggressive and like like when I masturbate, I like to watch like Viking shows, like with like murder and very aggressive things are happening. So I'm like, I think that was the beginning for me.
Yeah.
Like we're watching True Blood and now we're like into much darker things.
Yes. Okay, we're gonna get back to the Vikings a bit later. But do you kind of have like, what's your earliest memory of masturbation? Was this something that you sort of always remember doing, or like you mentioned, did it something you discovered later on in your life?
Yeah, I think it was something I discovered later. I just kind of like got curious, you know, slowly touching myself. I remember one time I stole a back massager from my parents to use for other things. And that was like my first vibration experience. Yeah. I was like, oh, this is not a back massager. So yeah, probably that, just like slow curiosity leading in. But like I always kind of knew, you know, my parents were very open. Like there was nothing that they like tried to hide from us. Mm-hmm. So everything was always easily accessible to kind of learn about.
Did you, what was sort of sex education like in your upbringing? I know there's like a real lack of it socially.
It was terrible. I actually didn't get my like real legit sex education class until I moved to Alaska, which by that age, like a lot of my peers were already having sex and were sexually active, especially in the environment like where I grew up in my earlier upbringing. I think my brother taught me the most, like not in like a weird way, but like I spent like maybe 4 days out of the month with him because it was split custody, and like he was 2 years older than me, so he was going through everything before I would. And I remember him telling me things like, if you just want a boyfriend, like you just gotta dress like a slut, like, and I'm like, that's not a good advice.
But maybe it's telling to the importance of sex education.
That is what young men want.
Yeah.
So like in the sense of like I always knew like what the guys were like into because I could tell from what my brother was doing. So and he had friends.
That's a good segue into my next question, which is like, what do you think are some of the biggest myths about female sexuality?
I think like the thing that pisses me off the most, not necessarily like a myth, but it's just like that we have to hide it. Like that we're not allowed to be sexual until we're like approached or like until like a guy wants to have sex. Like there's not a lot of like women initiating, women going and getting what they want. And I feel like it's equal. Like you can equally, we shouldn't be ashamed of our sexuality. I think the thing that like opened my eyes the most is like when you come into porn, you get to see like men in their natural state. Like they don't have to hide like the fact that they're horny or the fact that they want you. They don't have to act civilized. And like it's nice to be able, like women don't get to do that. And a lot of like civilian men even are still the same way. And it's like we are expected to kind of like, no, it only comes out behind closed doors.
It does.
Like, no, I will wear a shirt that says I'm a slut. Thank you.
So you mentioned that, you know, when you were doing the barista work, that kind of opened your eyes to other opportunities within sexy work.
Yeah.
And that led into creating an OnlyFans, which led you into
It was a very fast process. I actually did not have a lot of information on like the sex industry. I didn't even know that you could just get into porn. I had my OnlyFans for 3 days and my Twitter account for 3 days before I got like scouted through DMs on Twitter. And then I flew to LA like the day after. It was very like all within a week. I had like started my OnlyFans and Twitter, like moved to LA, like had my first scene scheduled. I actually got nervous, and because I was with a not so good agent at the time, I went home. I was like, fuck this. I was like, I got to this model house and it was just not good environment to be starting in. So I ran home and like thought on it for a month and before I like actually came back with the same agent and like shot my first scenes before like later switching agencies, thankfully, and finding a better fit and realizing like this is something I can do, like I could stay.
So without, you know, like obviously keeping to sharing the details you feel comfortable, but I think it's an important thing to share. You know, everybody's journey into the industry is different, but the one that you mentioned is one that I've heard a lot of times. Yeah. So, you know, in terms of, you know, that kind of quick escalation from, I think I might start this to,
doing it.
Yeah. What, if you were going to kind of go back and do it again, what advice would you have for yourself and what red flags would you look out for?
Yeah, I think mainly just like, there's not a lot of research that you can really do to find the information you're looking for, because like the porn you see on the internet is not, it gives you no like look into what a day on set is like. And then like even the things that you Google, like I feel like it's all in a different perception as to what like we would consider it to be like as performers. And it's constantly changing as well. So you could hear something about one company and then like think that that's every set, but it's not. I lost my train of thought.
Well, it's a good plug for me. I'll plug, Adult Time actually did just release, because, your point about the lack of information.
Yeah.
We just released, we have a available on our site. It's a performer center section.
Right.
And we want to use that to share resources for talent that are looking, to work with studios or curious about working with us. And we actually created a whole what to expect on an Adult Time set to help, at least for our company, explain transparently to performers what they should expect.
Exactly.
So, kind of going back to your experience, if you were to look at what happened to you and what red flags would you identify that you would kind of give as advice to others to avoid?
Just take your time. Yeah, really. Just take your time. Talk to people. I think that was where I got the best information, was like, don't be afraid to message people on Twitter that are in the industry. A lot of times, like when you see like a high following, you get like maybe they won't talk to you, they're ignoring you or something like that. But like honestly, if you just like try to talk to performers that are already in the industry, like I feel like that will give you the best information as to like when you're coming in. I think the best thing for me is that even though I was with a not so good agent, like coming in, like there was a girl in the agency that I was talking to that was like kind of helping me, walking me through, like making sure I was ready, like would tell me about certain sets before I worked on them. And so it's definitely good to make friends when you get in and kind of just know and communicate amongst yourselves. Also, I think it was odd coming from such like, because I worked in like an HR, like I did HR for a little while, and like I came in like with this corporate mindset, and then things on set are very like just like it's just go with the flow, very easy, laid back. And so I oftentimes would be like, oh, like I don't want to like do something wrong, and now I'm like, oh, it really doesn't matter. No one gives a fuck. Like it just exists.
The best of us are trying to be as corporate and professional as possible.
Yeah, so much easier.
So how long have you been in sort of working in porn now?
Yeah, I think I'm just like on the cusp of like a year and a half. I hit my 2-year mark, I believe, in April. So
what are but at the same point, a lifetime, right? So like what have you learned about your own sexuality since being in the industry?
Being in porn has been the best thing for me, I think. I've honestly had such a great experience just like learning myself, being able to be free, like in a way that I feel like most people don't get to be free. I'm very comfortable with myself. I feel oftentimes that I have less anxiety when I'm in a room full of people and I'm naked than I do when I'm fully clothed and in public. I feel like it's also just such an accepting environment as well. Like there's no kink shaming. Everyone has their own things. We're all just here to have fun. So I think it's opened my eyes so much more. And like coming from someone who went through like a lot of abuse as a child, it really made it easier for me to be sexual.
Yeah. And you mentioned just how kind of open and accepting the community is, right?
Yeah.
And
feels safe. Like I love that like consent is such a big thing. Like I feel safer having sex on set than I do in my personal life.
Well, and one of the real motivations behind this podcast was to sort of tap into the experiences we have as a community and also the practices we have as a community, because there is such a lack of that in the civilian world. And so, when given the right context, I think we have a lot to teach people. There's certainly a lot to share that could offer people advice.
Also, when you use your body in this way where it's literally like your career, like you learn how to take care of it so much better. There are things that I know about my body that I can regulate easier now that I probably never would have been able to, that I know tons of civilian girls are struggling with. And it's like those resources just aren't, like they're just not very known. They're not very publicized. So it's like you don't know that you can have boric acid or like all of these wonderful things that are meant for your vagina health. And like no one tells you about it.
So now you have a platform, Chanel, now to tell people about that. So actually that's one of my questions is, sexual health is such a essential part of, of a performer's career and just the industry in general. So, if you were going to be a sex ed teacher for a day tomorrow, like what would be your top lessons to share with particularly women?
Oh my God. Mainly just like, I feel like the pH is the biggest struggle. Like, especially if you are sexually active, like vaginas are temperamental. Like they have their own personality, and you have to like learn your kitty and figure out what she likes. And so like I think just being able to figure out a good way to keep your pH balance, like whatever works for you, just try things. Like I got a lot of different recommendations coming into the industry from girls who had been in for years, like what they do that works for them. It doesn't always work for you. You really just have to experiment. And so yeah, definitely like first like hygiene and like taking care of it, but then also like what do you do like when you're already fucked up? Like, you know, like when you have a rip, when you have a yeast infection or BV or something like that, there are plenty of things that you can do at home that you don't necessarily have to go to a doctor for. And I feel like a lot of it is just we end up taking like antibiotics, which in turn like just circles back around to like fuck up your pH even more. So like honestly, just like taking some time to like rest and like change your diet and like take supplements and warm baths or whatever works for you to like calm those things, and like time off too. Like sometimes your kitty just needs a rest.
Yes. What is some of your what are some of the most memorable moments you've had in terms of your porn career so far? So scenes you've done or moments you've had.
This is actually great because one of my favorite scenes I've ever done was for you. And it was one of the first times I worked for you.
I'm going to guess for sure.
Go ahead, take a guess.
Does it involve aliens?
It does. Like it's literally, that was such an amazing moment. I remember I wasn't even like the original talent. I just like happened to get booked in that day, and it was a long day, but it was awesome. I love trans women in our industry, and I got two of my favorites. So it was like, I felt like a little kid that day.
and there was some probing, I think, as well, right?
But I think my favorite part of that necessarily, like it had nothing to do with like the scene or whatever. It was just like the effort that went into it. Like the set looked amazing. It was just, I literally was transported, and it was so cool.
That one is on our Oopsie series for anyone who wants to check it out. And it really was a beautiful,
it was gorgeous.
Overall was an amazing episode. Maybe share one of your, if you can, for the sound bites. What was any funny or embarrassing stories that you would be willing to share that come to mind?
Oh yes, actually, I believe that day in particular, I did. So I was on my period, and I like to use a disc because I have a heavy flow. So like the sponges, they're not working. They're not getting it. And we were like, I was bent over the table, standing on like an apple box. This is an odd position, but it looked really good, I'm sure. And I like, when the dick went in, it like hit the disc in a certain way, which like made me feel like I pissed myself. But I thought that I shot blood out. I thought I just like super soaked her.
Yeah.
No, I just pissed myself. It was not squirt. No, literally just pissed myself. And the apple box like had a cover on it, and I was like, I'm sorry, guys. But no, I am such a klutz. I was shooting an anal scene one time, and like they were very like, you know, anal on the fact of your skin needs to look good. And like right before we started the sex, after the photos and everything, I fell onto like a bunch of wooden skewers.
Oh no.
And, like literally like were stuck in my ass. Still shot the scene. Yeah. I need bubble wrap.
Yeah, okay, good to know.
You know, I've kicked people in the balls, I've hit mics and like head-butted lenses. You gotta watch out for me.
Gotcha. Okay, good to know. Good to know. You had mentioned earlier that like one of the things that, you know, that has struck you since you've been shooting is just like all the effort we put as an industry on consent. Certainly that's something that's really integral at adult time with everything that we do. And I think there's a tremendous amount of value in exposing the work that we do to, you know, whoever may be watching, because there's a real lack of communication around sex and consent in real life. So how do you take what you've learned in terms of navigating consent at work and like brought it into your private life? Or what advice would you give for that?
Being in this industry has made me so communicative. Like, I honestly feel like until you are at a point where you can like speak about your sexuality and what you like and what you don't like and be confident in that, and where you're at a point where you can say no to something like in the moment, that maybe it's not the best time to start getting into like pro work. I feel like the industry will help you to be more comfortable, but you need to have some base of that, or you just end up like in bad situations. And I feel like a lot of that happens due to like lack of communication, and maybe that's because people don't feel safe to communicate in that space. But I think definitely like the consent on set has I've brought that so much into my personal life where I'm like, I talk about everything. I'm going to bore you before we have sex, but don't worry. I'm still going to do my job.
You're going to do a head to toe scan.
Do you like that?
Yeah.
No, I think definitely, because in order to have the most like enjoyable sexual experience, you really should take some time to kind of, because everyone's different, you know. There have been times when like a conversation was not had when it should have, and then like I did something that the other person didn't like, and it wasn't like a necessary situation where they hate me now, but like it was like, oh, okay, like we probably should have talked, like, you know, so that we wouldn't have had to run into this. Like, I'm sorry.
One of the things that we always do, as you know from having worked with us, is we have, you know, checklists where everybody fills in advance. But we also have like that scan that we do afterwards. And I find that a lot of people will kind of rush through the checklist like, no, I'm good, nothing. And I find a lot of male talent that we work with be like, oh, you know, like I'm good with everything. And then when you start to actually go through the head to toe scan, it's like,
then
oh,
like,
wait a minute.
Yeah.
So it is always important to double check, because I think, you know, it encourages that self-reflection, right?
And to give like, you know, your best performance, you know, you want to be able to do all of the things that you like to do. And if you don't get some prior information, like then you're kind of like, I myself, like if I don't know enough about the performer, like then I'm like going in kind of like weary. I'm like, okay, I'm not just gonna go straight to like some cool shit. I'm gonna make sure like we're easing you up and we're okay with it. But I feel like if you want to get like an outrageous performance, like yes, let's talk about every single little thing so I don't make a single mistake when I just go in.
So what have you discovered about like your own kinks and sexuality that you didn't know about before you got into pro work?
Yeah, I actually just recently started getting into like some more heavier bondage. And that was something that I would say probably like scared me a little bit when I got into the industry, but I am finding that I actually love it. Absolutely love it. There was also, you know, anal was something I never saw myself doing when I got into the industry. And I think that just had to do with like civilian boys sticking dry thumbs in my ass and me being like, that doesn't feel good. Like now it's like I was able to like, I've only ever done anal on camera, but I still like I'm able to enjoy it in a way that I didn't think that I was ever like I never thought I was gonna come from like anal or like squirt or like whatever. And now I'm like, okay, like I'm glad that like the industry pushes me a little bit out of my comfort zone so that I can find new comforts that like I didn't maybe known that I was into.
How do you navigate that? I know that that's sort of something when performers come in the industry, and luckily I feel like it's changing a lot where performers are coming in with a lot more kind of agency and autonomy. And it's not as much of a, oh, we're gonna, you know, get your first this and this and this.
Yeah, the scheduling of like how many years you want to So when it came down to it, I asked Mark Spiegler, I was like, you know, I know that you want me to do my anal, and I'm just like, when is the good point? And he's like, well, whenever you're ready to do it, you know, like you can wait 4 or 5 years for like a good rate, and then you missed every single anal scene that you could have shot at your normal rate and made that back 10 times over. Or you could go ahead and do it now and make all of that, you know, maybe you'll get a lower rate up front, but like you'll make it back in tenfold over time. And I think for me, I don't really care about, you know, oh, like if I shoot my anal now, like I'm only going to be shooting anal. It takes it off my showcase, like it, you know, whatever could possibly happen. Or like, cause I also plan on like doing my DP soon, which that's only 2 years in. And now we're doing like even more crazy things. But I think for me, it's like, I want to do it.
Yeah.
Like I plan on getting to a pretty, hardcore state of performing, like maybe like triple anal sometime before I retire. So like if we're gonna get there, we really got to get these little guys out the way.
There you go. You got to start building up to it. I guess.
Like I don't really care about having like this long career where I dragged it out. I'd rather just give you a shit ton of like really amazing shit all at once.
How have your fans, you know, do you find that the fans that you've cultivated, who, especially those that have been with you since like the earliest days, that's something that you're sort of seeing they're looking for you, or they're more just supporting you however you want to evolve your own sexuality?
Been great. I think they honestly just love watching me like ride my wave or ride of whatever I'm doing. And that's been the best thing. Obviously, you always have the guys that are like commenting and that are like, do this, or like, I can't wait for you to finally do this. And like, you're one in like so, but no, I think mainly like I do everything because I want to do it, and then secondly, like it's for my fans. Like I'm glad that they're there supporting me, watching me, being there. Like I would not be here without them, but at the same time, I think the better performance is going to come from like doing it because I want to do it at the end of the day, and then it's just cool that they get to be a part of it.
How do you manage the kind of knowing the difference between, the fans that support and all of the noise, particularly on social media, where there's like a lot of anonymous pressure and hating and real kind of like kink shaming and misogynistic.
And I mean, like this goes back to like when I got into the industry, it was the first time I decided to do something for myself. Like I just don't give a fuck. Like you can like it, you can hate it. Like everybody has their thing. I honestly love the hate comments sometimes because some of them are really funny. There was one that was like, when I first got in, like I didn't realize that some of the noises I was making were a little not fun to listen to. And so like I went on Pornhub and there was some comments about like that noise is just, and I'm just like, you're right though. Like you're so right. So sometimes it's good because you'll see things in yourself that you actually do want to fix. And I also I think watching your own porn is very important as like education for like how you want to improve as a performer, because you won't know if you don't see yourself. But no, they're just funny.
What's the experience like of watching yourself in the most kind of intimate of settings?
Yeah, I think some people don't want to watch themselves, and I can get that.
Like I would never. I would never want to watch.
I love it. Like I've even like watched a few of my VR scenes where I'm like back in my own, but like I'm
there you go.
Myself now. But no, I love it. Like I think it definitely like boosts my confidence to see myself because I don't know. I feel like sometimes you feel like, oh, this isn't good. This isn't whatever. But like to see it on camera and the way it's all put together, I'm like, okay, like that was hot. Like you need to do that again.
Were you a big porn watcher before you got in?
Religiously.
Yeah, religiously. Okay, so you got to share like what were some of your go-tos?
I was
themes or
watching
actors?
some really raunchy shit. Like none of what I was watching was being filmed in the US. And like all the like old like really like hardcore gangbangs and like just when I was growing, I didn't tell people what type of porn I watched. Like when guys would ask me like I would be like girl, lesbian, like just some boy girl pussy eating. Like no, in reality I was watching like hardcore bondage and like these sex rooms where these girls are like tied up and being humiliated in front of people, which is great because that's what I'm into now.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say that's kind of an interesting correlation, right? Because like I somebody told me years ago, and it's always stuck with me, that what people tend to watch when it comes to adult content is what you would never like or not likely to do in real life, right? Like that sort of fantasy element. But in your case, you were really into that. But as you said, you didn't intend to necessarily do that until like you gained that confidence. And you're like, I want to do that.
Yeah. Once I got the opportunities, I was like, I'm totally down and like getting more comfortable into it and things like that. No, it was great. But I think a lot of it too was I used to love watching like the beginning of all the porn. Like the comedy, like Team Skeet does a lot of comedy, and so like the comedy porn I loved it. Just the intro though. Yeah. Once we got to the sex, I was like, no, thank you. I just wanted the storyline. But now that I'm like in porn, I don't necessarily watch porn anymore. I think it's harder because I know who everyone is, and like I'm like, these are my friends. Yeah. But now I like watch Netflix, like TV shows or movies, and so I'll pick like an action movie or like an MMA fight, something really manly. Yeah. Where like guys are like fighting for their families and that'll get me off.
Like you mentioned, the Vikings.
And it's so weird because it's like the moment they go to war and it gets all gory is the moment I'm like peeking.
So I was going to ask you, what are some of your biggest turn-ons these days? So I think you may have just already
manly
answered that.
Shit, like cut a tree down, take your shirt off, shave your beard. Like I don't know.
Have you seen that guy on TikTok? There's one guy on TikTok. I think his name is Thorin Bradley, and he just chops down trees, but he's extremely like.
Yes, I have seen him, but I'll do you one better.
Okay.
So there's a girl on Instagram. I'm sure she has a TikTok as well, but I came across her, and she's like this like gorgeous like butch lesbian in the woods, and she chops the trees, and I tell you, like she turns me on more than any of these men. Like I see her like arm muscles and she's like just like nothing, and I'm like,
That's amazing. That's amazing. I'll have to go check that out because I find that I get like strangely drawn to that guy's TikTok where like I can't stop watching it on loop, and I'm like, I gotta admit, he's pretty hungry.
It's great. He's doing a great job.
He really knows how to cut down
that tree.
Yeah. So, you know, you had mentioned that, you know, you're now feeling more comfortable with exploring kind of more hardcore content. What are some of the projects that would be like on your bucket list in, you know, the coming years that you'd love to do?
Well, I just started working with kink, so like I want to adventure farther into that and see like how much more I can handle. But I think my real goals for this year, like aside from all the hardcore, is like I really just want to like I feel like I do so many scenes that like I don't get the opportunity to do like bigger movies or like features or things like that because like I can act, I can do lines and things like that, but I've been so focused on like all the littler things that I don't have the time. So I think this year I really want to be able to like have time to do bigger projects that take a little bit more time and thought and effort and aren't just sex. Like, you know, the sex is great.
But you're looking for some long days on set.
I'm looking for some hard work.
Good. Well, generally a feature is going to involve long days on set. So.
No, of course. Yeah.
What do you like to do like outside of shooting?
I'm very simple. I love my apartment. I love to be home. I'm a homebody. I don't really like to go out much, but anything like outside and in nature. I just got a kitty, so I've been loving on that one lately. But no, I read a lot of books as well. Very disgusting books.
Okay, what are you reading right now?
Well, I just got done reading Haunting Adeline, which was amazing. Yeah, that shit, like, I had to put it down a few times because I was like, this is demented.
It sounds a bit scary.
It was great. No, it's actually about, like, a stalker who like, stalks this girl, and then they end up falling in love. But it was, it was a fun play. But, like, no, I've found that, like, besides the watching Netflix to masturbate, that, like, reading my porn hits a lot deeper because I get to imagine. Like, there's more of the creativity going on. It's my own little world, so.
What are your biggest red flags?
Like in men?
Or in any partner?
In any partner. You know, I just don't date anymore. I think the dating
it's a good strategy.
is just a red flag. But no, I'd have to say the biggest now, especially because now that I'm in the industry, is like when they fetishize my job. Because you get like three types of men. You get the men who just don't care. They see it as a job. You get the men who fetishize what you do in a sexual way. And then you get the men who like try to convince you to quit.
Right.
And so I think those two, the try to convince you to quit and the like fetishizing are like my biggest like, you know, I'm very transparent. I don't expect to like hide my job from my partner. And I also don't expect to like them to be okay with it. So I definitely have had a few options that I've just had to be like, it's just better for both of us to not. So I think just focusing on my career is probably the best bet right now.
It's interesting that you say that because I think there's, and my wife was a performer, and I remember when we first met, and obviously we met from working in the same industry. But I remember like it took me a hot minute, and even with like the best, most sort of like innocent vanilla of intentions, it took me a good minute to recognize that there's the persona and then there's the person, and they're not the same.
No.
And so I think that, you know, just to go back to your question or your answer about that kind of the fetishization. How do you think we can help people to understand, because of all the types of celebrities and influencers in our culture, adult influencers and creators tend to be the most lumped into that group of like, there's no distinction between persona and person. Yeah. And that really bugs me because I recognized it even in myself. I fell down that same rabbit hole. So how do you think we can kind of break that ceiling and help to really show, oh no, wait, we're people?
I think a lot of that has to do with like what you as a person choose to show like to the internet. Like I myself, I try to like, yes, I'm Chanel and I post all my Chanel stuff, but I try to also like just be real. Like this is me in bed looking like shit, you know, like I'm just a person. Yeah. But I'm not sure that there's really a way, like, cause everything through the camera lens is like, it's always going to be what we want you to see. Yeah. And so I think it just takes people being able to like break their own barriers and be like, this is who I really am aside from like what I do. But I think you just have to meet the person in their own environment. Like, not even when I meet people on set, it's like I'm bringing Chanel to work today.
Yeah.
So like she's the person who likes to talk and like get around and is social, and then me at home is like,
weird recluse.
Like I created this likable person for you guys to hang out with. So
yeah, I like to say there's a band called Bree Mills.
Yeah, literally.
I know that we just shot one of our first episodes with you for Up Close as a project. The kind of spirit behind that studio and its adult times, one of our newest studios we've been creating is to really show a more, getting away from the persona, focusing more on the people, showing a more kind of intimate way to get to know performers. How does that vision resonate with you? Maybe share a little bit about your experience, working with us on that project, and just in general, what you think about when it comes to porn that tries to showcase more authentic female pleasure and sexuality.
Yeah, I love it. I mean, I feel like sometimes when you walk onto set, like the scripts don't always like match like your style or what you're doing. And a lot of this job is like just adapting to whatever they want you to do that day. I love the days where I just get to be me and just show up. That day was so great and easy. And even though like it was a little long, it wasn't actually long. No, we were done quick. They were all there for a very long day. Yes. When I read the script, I thought that it was going to be a lot, and it wasn't.
Mm-hmm.
But it was just, it's nice to not have to think about it. Like, I did have to like look at the camera, but it didn't feel like I was like putting on some like outrageous porn performance with like crazy facial expressions and things that I wouldn't typically do.
Yeah.
But no, it was nice. Plus, I also got to work with like one of my favorite men to work with. So that's always nice when you have automatic chemistry with someone.
Mm-hmm.
So
Who is your scene partner though?
Robbie.
I was going to say Robbie Apples is like the unofficial mascot of Up Close, because he's in like probably 75% of our scenes, and he loves it.
We were joking about like how everything really just needed to be about him that day, and I was just in the background, like because he's the the star.
Yeah, no, he's been a great, just a great kind of like part of this project.
Well, he's also such an easy person to work with, especially for new girls too. Like he's just so gentle, so sweet, has a great like energy. Makes it a good day.
Awesome. I love to hear that. So the last question that I have for you today, and obviously it kind of sums up a lot of what we've been discussing, where we've been talking about your experience and what advice you would share. There's probably a lot of people watching who have their own insecurities about their sexuality. What advice would you give them based on everything you've learned that's brought you to where you are today?
Oh my gosh. Just don't care. Like you live in your own skin, and you're going to live in your own skin for the rest of your life. And if you continue to like waste time being worried about what other people are going to think of you, how they're going to judge you or perceive you, like you're going to lose so much happiness as to if you just like take some time to really like be alone and like love yourself and appreciate every part of your body. Like when I got into the industry, I thought my pussy was ugly. Like it took other people telling me that I was pretty to like really let it go. And that just came from like years of bullying, which I'm sure that everyone has went through. But like oftentimes when you got bullied a lot, it's because you're the opposite of what you were getting bullied for.
Yes.
It comes from jealousy. And I think just finding like a good circle of people who support you that you can be completely like transparent and comfortable with is like the best. Like have a safe space so that you like can get back to, like for me, like with the persona thing, like I needed to leave the country for a month to like remember who I was before I got into the industry. So I think everyone's going to struggle with that all the time. You just have to take those moments to like ground yourself and be like, no, I am okay. Like I'm gorgeous. I'm beautiful. I'm amazing. Let me go back out.
Self-care is really, really important. It's sort of an overused term these days, but it's like business critical to being able to perform in whatever you do.
Not even just the aspect of like physically caring for yourself, but just spend time with yourself.
Yeah.
Like that can be the best self-care, is to just sit with yourself. Because like if you can't sit with yourself for 5 minutes, like there's a problem. You need to be okay in your space.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's been such a pleasure to get to know you.
Thank you for having me.
Amazing. Well, we love Chanel Camryn. And it's been a blast having you in so many of our projects, and I can't wait to see what else you're going to do. Hopefully with some long days on set.
Yes.
I will remember that. Thank you, my dear. I appreciate you. From nurse to bikini barista to porn star. Today, I got to chat with Chanel Camryn, and it was a wild conversation. We talked about so many things, but what really stood out to me was, I think, watching your own content to build confidence and masturbating to Vikings. So I'd be curious to hear what you thought about our conversation today. If you want to support this podcast, our mission, and of course, Chanel, please leave your likes, your comments, subscribe to this channel. That's how we get engagement from you, and it really helps us. You can also check out all of our socials, our links. They're linked up in the description below. Once again, I appreciate y'all hearing us out. We have a lot of good to say. We have a lot of advice to give and a lot of life experiences. So it's really important. We thank you for listening, and we will see you next week.